For over 2 decades, Rusty Wallace was one of NASCAR's most electric figures.
Oh, it's man, Rusty Wallace stands off of turn 4.
With his aggressive driving style, blunt attitude, and raw talent behind the wheel,
Wallace heads for the checkered flag.
he carved out a legacy that few in the sport could rival. From the moment he burst onto the scene in the 1980s, Wallace was a storm, equal parts charm and chaos. He didn't just race, he fought for every inch. Fans loved him, rivals respected him, and by the time 2005 rolled around, his place in racing history was already cemented. 55 career wins, 349 top 10 finishes, and the 1989 Winston Cup Championship. Wallace wasn't just a driver, he was a brand. But even legends have to let go. In 2005, Wallace announced that the season would be his last. His farewell tour began at Daytona and wound its way through the heart of stock car country. At every track, fans packed the stands to say goodbye. Banners read, "Thanks, Rusty," while rival crews tipped their hats to the man who had outlasted generations of competition. Wallace himself seemed conflicted. In interviews, he smiled, but there was always a weight behind his eyes, a hesitancy that suggested this goodbye wasn't entirely on his terms. Then came Homestead, the final race. Wallace strapped into his car for one last time, the roar of the engines humming like a funeral march. It wasn't about winning that day, it was about closure. The entire NASCAR world watched as Rusty, once the sport's most defiant outlaw, prepared to ride off into the sunset. Or so they thought. Because while the cameras captured a legend's farewell, what they didn't capture, what only a few heard over a quiet radio channel, was the real ending. And it was nothing like anyone expected. The weeks leading up to Rusty Wallace's final race at Homestead in 2005 were anything but quiet. Across sports networks and NASCAR circuits, it felt like a farewell parade in slow motion. Every weekend became a tribute, every interview a eulogy in progress. Wallace was honored by fellow drivers, praised in documentaries, and given standing ovations by crowds that had once booed him for wrecking their favorite drivers. It was emotional. It was scripted. And according to those close to Rusty, it wasn't how he wanted it to end. Behind the scenes, whispers of hesitation followed him. Close friends noted how distracted he seemed. There were rumors that Wallace had quietly debated whether to postpone his retirement, possibly even return the following season. But by then, the marketing machine had already shifted into high gear. Sponsors had moved on. Farewell merchandise was printed by the thousands. The press tour was booked. There was no turning back. In private moments, Wallace reportedly told confidants that he felt more boxed in than celebrated. He wasn't the same hungry 1989 champion who slammed fenders with Dale Earnhardt and Terry Labonte. But he also wasn't ready to be a retired legend sipping cocktails in a broadcasting booth. The finality of it all began to suffocate him. Still, being Rusty Wallace, he kept it together publicly. He signed autographs, he smiled through interviews, he repeated the same lines. "It's time. I've done all I came to do." But that didn't sound like a man at peace. It sounded like a man repeating what he was told to believe. And so the build-up continued, week after week, until Homestead finally arrived. Wallace showed up, suited up, and strapped in. But something was stirring beneath the surface, and it was about to break through when no one expected it. November 20th, 2005. The Ford 400 at Homestead Miami Speedway. Wallace's final race. The sky was cloudless, the crowd electric, the moment historic. But for Rusty Wallace, it was strangely quiet. There were no major wins left to chase, no championship on the line, just a single race standing between him and retirement. And as engines fired across the grid, Wallace took a deep breath, his final as an active driver. He drove hard that day, aggressive as ever, trading spots with future legends like Jimmy Johnson and Tony Stewart. Wallace raced not for glory, but for identity. Because after that checkered flag dropped, everything he had been for 25 years, everything that defined him, would be over. And he knew it. The race played out like any other. Wallace didn't lead, but he held strong. Finished 13th, not spectacular, but respectable. As the crowd stood in applause, Wallace radioed in a thank you to his team. He waved to the grandstands. It all felt like closure, a clean farewell. Then came the lap that wasn't on the schedule. After the checkered flag, Wallace stayed on the track, circling once more. A victory lap without the victory. The other drivers had pulled in. The TV broadcast was signing off. But Wallace wasn't ready to stop. He coasted slowly, waving out the window, letting the moment stretch just a little longer. That's when something unusual happened. The cameras faded out, but Wallace's team radio was still live. And what came next, only those tuned into that channel would hear. As Rusty Wallace circled the track one last time, alone, unhurried, unfiltered, his team remained silent, respecting the moment. The noise of the crowd faded beneath the hum of the engine. And then, his voice cracked through the static. What was supposed to be a triumphant sign-off became something much more intimate. Wallace whispered into the radio, not realizing, or maybe not caring, that his mic was still hot. There was no scripted goodbye, no dramatic speech, just a single chilling sentence, spoken so quietly that even some team members didn't catch it at first. "Tell them I didn't want it to end like this." For years, that line lived in whispers, passed around in pit crews, radio archives, and among a handful of insiders who had access to the original comms feed. NASCAR never aired it. Official footage of the lap ends moments before the whisper. Wallace never spoke of it. But the few who heard it never forgot it. Some say there was more. A second sentence. A name. A pause followed by static. Others claim the full transmission was edited or deleted before being archived. Regardless of what exactly was said, one thing was clear. The final moment of Rusty Wallace's legendary career wasn't the polished tribute the world saw. It was raw, haunting, regretful, and no one, until years later, knew what had truly happened during that last lonely lap. The whisper hit like a thunderclap in a closed room. Quiet, but unforgettable. "Tell them I didn't want it to end like this." Those 9 words became NASCAR's version of a ghost story, recounted by crew members, quietly circulated in forums, and dissected in fan podcasts years after the race. Everyone wanted to know what Rusty Wallace really meant. Did he mean the race? His career? His relationships within the sport? Or was it something more personal, deeper than anyone suspected? According to 2 former pit crew members, the moment was met with stunned silence over the radio. No one responded, not even his longtime crew chief. The car coasted off the track. The garage door closed, and with that, so did an era. Later that night, members of the team allegedly replayed the radio feed. Some described it as eerie. Others said it was heartbreaking. Not because Rusty sounded broken, but because he sounded unresolved. Like a man who had been forced to smile through a goodbye he never wanted to give. The mystery grew deeper when a rumor surfaced about a second line. one that never made it into the leaked transcript. A former audio tech claimed Wallace said a name right after the whisper. Some think it was his brother, Kenny. Others think it was a rival, or even Dale Earnhardt. But whatever it was, NASCAR buried it. To this day, there's no official archive of that final radio feed. NASCAR's response? No comment. And Wallace? He never confirmed or denied it. On the surface, it's just a sentence, a whisper, an emotional moment from a man closing a legendary chapter. But to die-hard fans and racing insiders, Rusty Wallace's final radio message meant so much more. Because it cracked open a truth few were willing to acknowledge. Not every racing legend gets the ending they deserve. Wallace had spent decades building a reputation as one of NASCAR's fiercest drivers. He clashed with Earnhardt. He feuded with Jeff Gordon. He raced hard, talked fast, and never held back. But as NASCAR shifted into a new corporate era, focused on younger stars, clean-cut images, and brand deals, Wallace began to feel like a relic. He wasn't flashy like Gordon. He didn't fit the polished PR mold. And his refusal to sugarcoat opinions rubbed sponsors and execs the wrong way. Over time, his influence waned. TV spotlight dimmed. He was celebrated, but quietly edged out of relevance. That whisper, it wasn't just about a race. It was a reflection on being left behind, on seeing the sport he helped build move on without him, on knowing that the final lap, the final mic check, the final farewell didn't come on his terms. And maybe, just maybe, it was about someone he lost, a friend, a rival, a piece of himself he couldn't get back. That's why it matters, because behind the fire suits and the fame was a man. And that whisper? It was the moment the man, not the racer, spoke up. If you ask longtime insiders, they'll tell you, Rusty Wallace wasn't always easy to work with, but he was real. And that realness often brought tension. Throughout the 90s and early 2000s, Wallace had built a reputation as a driver who wouldn't play politics. He called out NASCAR's decisions, he clashed with teammates, and he famously butted heads with Dale Earnhardt more than once, especially after their wreck at Bristol in '95 that led to Wallace throwing a water bottle and calling out the Intimidator on live TV. That fire made Wallace a fan favorite, but it also earned him enemies behind closed doors. As NASCAR evolved, Wallace didn't always evolve with it. He didn't hide his frustration about the sport going too corporate. He disliked the scripted interviews, the media training, and the brand sanitization that followed. He wanted to race, and he wanted to win. Everything else? Noise. Some in the garage say Wallace was viewed as difficult. Others say he was misunderstood. But nearly everyone agrees. His exit wasn't as smooth as it should have been. There were unspoken tensions with younger drivers, rumored disagreements with NASCAR leadership, and even friction with his own team over the farewell tour's direction. So when he whispered, "I didn't want it to end like this," those who knew the backstory, they understood exactly what he meant. It wasn't just the end of a career, it was the end of his NASCAR. For years, it was believed that NASCAR recorded everything. Every pit call, every team radio, every last whisper through the headset, especially during a legend's retirement lap. But here's where the story turns from emotional to suspicious. Multiple insiders claim that Rusty Wallace's final radio transmission was recorded in full. In fact, according to a former NASCAR audio technician, the raw audio file existed, unclipped, unedited, time-stamped. But when ESPN later requested archival footage for a retrospective, NASCAR's response was oddly vague. That file is unavailable. Unavailable? This sparked a wave of conspiracy theories. Did someone inside NASCAR deliberately pull the file to protect a reputation? Was it too raw? Too controversial? Or did Rusty say something about someone that couldn't be allowed into the public domain? What's even stranger is what happened next. In 2016, a low-quality snippet of that final transmission leaked online. The voice sounded like Rusty. The whisper was audible. It matched what crew members remembered. But before it gained traction, the video was removed. Copyright claim. Then the uploader disappeared and never posted again. Months later, rumors swirled that a private collector bought the full recording at a motorsports memorabilia auction. If true, it means NASCAR didn't lose the file. They let it go, quietly. So why bury it? Why protect it? And more importantly, what's in that missing moment they never wanted the world to hear? Rusty Wallace has never confirmed the content of that final radio message. Not in interviews, not in his autobiography, not even during the emotional tributes aired in the years after his retirement. And that silence? It's intentional. When asked directly in a 2010 interview, Rusty chuckled, leaned back, and said, "Some things are just for the team, just for me. That lap, that moment. I said what I had to say. That's enough." It was a deflection, but one heavy with weight. Because for a man known for his candor, his sharp commentary, and his unfiltered views on everything from restrictor plates to driver etiquette, this silence stood out. Crew members have said Rusty never brought it up again, not even at reunions or private dinners. It became an unspoken agreement. The whisper stays where it belongs, locked in memory. Was it grief? Was it pride? Or just a personal decision to let that moment exist as something sacred? Rusty's career spanned over 700 races. He's been inducted into the Hall of Fame. He's analyzed races from the broadcast booth. But the one thing he's never broken down is that final lap. Maybe because it didn't need to be explained. Maybe because, for once, he didn't want to be understood. Close your eyes and imagine it again. The sun setting over Homestead. The crowd still on its feet. Engines quiet. Just one car, slowly rolling around the track. Rusty Wallace, the number 2. Not racing, just driving. It wasn't about the finish line anymore. It was about reflection, about everything left unsaid, about moments, both triumph and tragedy, that played out on tracks just like this one. For Wallace, that final lap was more than tradition. It was closure. And yet, that whisper revealed that closure doesn't always mean peace. "Tell them I didn't want it to end like this." It's a phrase that lingers, not just for what it means, but for what it invites. Questions, reflection, and in some ways, a deeper connection to a man we thought we knew. Because Wallace wasn't just a champion. He was a voice in an era that was fading. A last link to when racing was raw, emotional, dangerous, and real. Maybe that final lap wasn't for the cameras, or the fans, or even NASCAR. Maybe it was for him. And maybe that whisper was the real checkered flag.